A few years ago, something happened to me that still gives me nightmares. The company I worked for started focusing more on hiring people with higher qualifications, and when they offered an advanced course that promised a salary increase, I jumped at the chance. The only downside? The distance, more than an 8-hour drive. Luckily, a friend of mine had a house near the university and offered me a room to stay in. It was a pretty isolated area, just 3 houses separated by small fields full of trees. I've always loved the feeling of being surrounded by the woods, wrapped in total silence. It was almost like a mini vacation every week in a secluded cabin. Usually my friend was there to welcome me, but sometimes, because of his job, he'd be away. When that happened, he'd leave the key in a hidden spot so I could let myself in. The night it all happened was one of those nights where I'd be alone. It was raining outside. The drive up was rough. The whole area had no streetlights. The rain was pounding against the car, and the dirt road had turned into a muddy mess. But once I got inside, everything was calm. I turned on the heater, made dinner, and worked late into the night. Despite the peacefulness, I felt uneasy. The house felt too empty, like something was lurking in the dark corners. I knew my mind was probably messing with me. I was in an unfamiliar place, completely alone, in the middle of a storm. I kept telling myself that the occasional noises I heard were either my imagination or just the house settling, old wood creaking and shifting like old houses do. Then I started feeling like I was being watched. At first, I chalked it up to exhaustion, but at some point, I could swear I heard footsteps. Soft sounds, like someone shuffling their feet across the wooden floor. I jumped up and shut all the blinds. The discomfort only grew, gnawing at me second by second. I called my friend, but he didn't pick up, which only made me feel worse. Eventually, I decided I was being ridiculous and just needed to sleep it off. There was no way someone else was in the house with me, so what was the point of freaking out? My room didn't have a lock, but my friend's did. I grabbed a blanket from the couch and went to his room instead. Locked the door behind me, lay down on the bed, and tried convincing myself I was just being paranoid. I'd explain everything to him later. He'd understand. But sleep wouldn't come. The silence was suffocating, only broken by the sound of the rain and my own heartbeat hammering in my ears. I picked up a book from his nightstand, hoping it would help me doze off. I must have eventually fallen asleep. Then, around 3 a.m., I woke up abruptly to the robotic voice of Siri. "Sorry, I didn't catch that. Could you repeat the question?" My blood ran cold. The room was pitch black, except for the eerie glow of the screen. Outside, the rain kept falling. I fumbled for my phone in the dark, but I couldn't find it. I was just about to turn on the bedside lamp when Siri spoke again. "Understood. Calling emergency services." Right then, I heard heavy footsteps on the stairs. Not just one set, multiple. And something scraping against the wood, like nails digging into the steps. I wasn't alone. I bolted upright and, without thinking, ran straight for the window. The bedroom door shook from a violent impact. Then another. No hesitation. I threw the window open and jumped. I'd rather deal with a broken leg than come face to face with whatever was on the other side of that door. The fall was rough, but the mud softened the landing a little. A sharp pain shot through my ankle, but adrenaline kept me moving. I ran across the soaked field, not daring to look back. The wind and rain drowned out most sounds, but I knew something was out there. Something moving in the darkness. Something that didn't belong. I had no idea if I was actually being chased, or if my own terror was playing tricks on me. Every shadow looked like a figure. Every noise made me want to scream. When I finally stopped to catch my breath, I realized I wasn't being followed. At least, not by anything I could see. Turns out, Siri really did call the police. About 15 minutes later, when I was nearing the village center, I heard the distant sound of sirens. When the cops got to the house, they found the bedroom door destroyed. Deep, jagged scratches gouged into the wood, like something had torn through it with bare hands. Nothing was stolen. Nothing else was damaged. Just that door, shredded like it had been attacked in a blind, inhuman rage. We never found out who or what had been in that house. I don't know if it was the target, or my friend, or if it was all just some terrifying random encounter. My friend stayed away from the house for a while, crashing at a relative's place. Eventually, he went back. As for me, I never set foot there again. Later, we read in the police report that the front door, the only way in, was still locked from the inside when they arrived. Just like all the windows, except the one I jumped from. Whoever, or whatever, did that was already inside when I got there. But why wait until I was asleep? And why ask Siri questions? The case was never solved. No suspects, no leads, just an open door to something I never want to understand. Hey, Horror Spectator here. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on post notifications so you're always in the loop when new videos drop. We post 2 videos every week. If you're really into this content, consider sharing it with your friends. It really helps us grow this community. Now, let's move on to the second story. The story I'm about to tell you started about 2 months ago, and I'm not entirely sure it's over. About 5 years ago, my wife and I moved into a house. It was modern, spacious, with a minimalist design that she loved in a way I never fully understood. From day one, that house made me uncomfortable. I'm not the type to scare easily. I don't have irrational fears, and little things don't freak me out. But that house had something I couldn't explain. It was too spacious, with long, empty hallways and a silence that felt amplified by the lack of walls. I constantly felt exposed, like there was always open space around me, a void that was never truly filled. I told her multiple times that I hated that house, but she loved it. We had invested a fortune, so moving out wasn't an option. I eventually learned to live with it, but I never really felt at home there. The worst part was the nights I spent alone. My wife is a doctor, and she works hospital shifts, many of them overnight. I'd never had trouble sleeping alone in our old place. In fact, I always thought it was healthy for a couple to have some space now and then. But in that house, the nights she wasn't there were torture. The silence became unbearable, like it sucked all the normalcy out of the house, leaving only an uncomfortable emptiness. Despite the discomfort, nothing weird had ever happened. Until about 2 months ago. That night, everything seemed normal. I spent the evening on the couch, trying to finish a book, but I was struggling to focus. I felt oddly drained, like something was sucking the energy out of me. I decided to go to bed early. It wasn't even 11 p.m. when I was already in bed. My wife's shift had started at 8:30 p.m., so she wouldn't be back until morning. I'd probably be awake by the time she got home. I woke up with a start around 2 a.m. The room was dark, with just a faint glow from the window. It took me a few seconds to understand what had woken me up. Then I heard it. My name. A voice was calling me. At first I was groggy, but then my blood ran cold. I realized I wasn't alone in the house. Someone was there. But as my mind cleared, I recognized the voice. My wife's. I felt immediate relief, but also growing confusion. What was she doing home so early? Did something happen at the hospital? I got up and went to the bedroom door. I reached for the hallway light switch, but it wasn't working. I flicked it a few more times. Nothing. A power outage? but my alarm clock was still on. Weird. I turned back to grab my phone. I didn't want to walk around in the dark and risk falling down the stairs. As I was feeling around my nightstand, I heard it again. My name. The tone was strange, artificial, emotionless. No urgency, no distress, no sign that anything was wrong. But it was her voice. No doubt about it. My whole body went on high alert. Something wasn't right. I stood by the bedroom door and, in the darkness, called out to her. I asked if everything was okay, told her to come upstairs. Silence. For a few seconds, nothing. Then, again, I heard my name. Fear took over. The voice wasn't responding to me. It was just repeating my name, mechanically. Something was wrong. Very wrong. I shut the bedroom door and locked it. Grabbed my phone and called her. It rang. 1 ring, 2 rings, 3. Then it went to voicemail. My heart was pounding. I was about to call again when I got a text. Everything okay? Sorry, I can't talk. My shift is crazy busy. I'll be home by 9 a.m. If it's urgent, call me again. My whole body tensed. My wife was at the hospital. So who, or what, was in the house? That night, I didn't hear anything else. But I didn't sleep. I sat in bed, phone in hand, trying to figure out what to do. I had never been that scared in my life. And I should mention, I've been home alone a lot since I was a kid. It never bothered me. If anything, I used to love those moments to myself. When my wife got home in the morning, I forced a smile and told her I had called her in the middle of the night, half asleep. Maybe I was sleepwalking. She thought it was weird, but she was too exhausted to dwell on it. She took a shower and went to bed. Since that night, I haven't been alone again. She's been working morning shifts, covering for a pregnant coworker. But I know that eventually she'll go back to night shifts. I know I'll be alone in this house again. And I know that whatever was here that night is still here. Sometimes I can feel it. When I walk down the upstairs hallway, I feel something watching me from behind, even though I know my wife is downstairs. When I turn around, there's nothing. Just the emptiness of that hallway. I don't know what it was. I don't know if I want to know. But I'm sure of one thing. This story isn't over yet. I must have been around 12 or 13 when it happened. I remember every single detail as if it happened yesterday, and sometimes I feel like I'm still trapped in that night. It was Valentine's Day, and the rain came down in relentless sheets. My parents, as always, planned to go out for dinner, and initially wanted to leave me with Mrs. Alice, our neighbor at the end of the street. Not that I minded staying with her. Honestly, I liked it. She baked me cookies, let me play with her cats, and never got mad when I stayed up past bedtime. But at school, the kids teased me for it, called me a baby for never staying home alone. So, that year, I put my foot down. I begged, argued, insisted, until my parents finally caved. Looking back, that might have been the worst decision of my life. Worse still, I bragged about it. Told everyone at school that I'd be home alone, that I wasn't scared, that I was mature enough. That bit of arrogance might have led to everything that came next. The night came. My parents left, my mother drilling into me one last time. Don't open the door for anyone, no matter what. The only exception is Mrs. Alice. If you need anything, call us. We'll be home as soon as we can. Dinner was already made, just needed heating, so I flopped onto the couch and put on some teen drama I wasn't normally allowed to watch. Outside, the storm raged on. Wind howling through the trees, rain hammering against the windows. Around 8:30 p.m., I got up to heat my food. That's when I first noticed the car. It was parked right in front of my house, engine off. Through the downpour and the darkness, I could barely make out the silhouette of someone inside. A small chill ran through me, but I brushed it off. It might seem strange that something like this unsettled me, but just so you understand better, the street I lived on was wide, full of parking spaces, and had large houses that were far apart from each other. The road was empty, except for the occasional neighbor's car. A car parked right in front of my house was intentional. I told myself it probably was a neighbor's friend, or someone waiting for the rain to let up. I ignored it and went back to waiting for the microwave to finish. Then, as I turned to go back to the living room, I saw it. A shadow moving past the window. My heart skipped a beat. There was no reason for anyone to be that close to the house. I stood there, frozen, my mind racing. My first instinct was to call my parents. But then I hesitated. If I panicked now, they'd never let me stay home alone again. They would say I wasn't ready. So I told myself it was nothing, just my imagination. And I forced myself to sit back down. Not even 5 minutes later, I heard a noise. A dull thud, muffled, like something shifting in the garage. I sat up, ears straining. Silence. Nothing else. Then the phone rang. I jumped and let out a shaky breath. Of course. My parents checking in. I hurried to pick up, but there was no voice on the other end. "Hello?" I asked, my own voice barely above a whisper. Silence. "Mom? Dad?" Then finally, a voice. A deep, gravelly whisper that sent ice through my veins. "You're not alone." I couldn't breathe. The room spun. The car outside, the shadow in the window, the noise from the garage. Everything fell into place and made me realize that none of it had been my imagination. Someone was inside my house. I didn't think. I acted. The phone slipped from my hands, crashing to the floor, and I bolted for the kitchen door. As I reached for the lock, I heard it. The door to the garage creaking open. Heavy, fast footsteps. Then, a man burst into the kitchen, charging straight at me. I barely had time to react. My hands fumbled at the lock. He was almost on me when it happened. He slipped. His feet caught on the rug in the hallway, and he crashed to the floor. It gave me just enough time to rip the door open and sprint outside, screaming into the rain. I thought about running to the backyard, but he would catch me. He was bigger, faster. So I did the only thing I could. I ran for Mrs. Alice's house. My bare feet slapped against the wet pavement as I pounded on her door, not daring to look back. My chest burned, my hands ached from how hard I was knocking. Then, despite myself, I turned. Through the downpour, through the darkness, I saw him. He hadn't followed me outside. He stood inside my house behind the living room window, staring at me, watching. The door flew open, and Mrs. Alice yanked me inside. I barely needed to say a word for her to realize that something was terribly wrong. Without hesitation, she grabbed the phone to call the police as I started explaining what had happened. The police arrived within minutes, but by then, he was gone. No footprints, no sign of forced entry. They searched the neighborhood but never found a single trace of him. And the worst part? I couldn't describe him. Not really. I had seen his silhouette, his movement, his presence. But his face? His car? It was all a blur. For years I wondered, was he watching me at school? Had he heard me bragging? Did he know I would be alone? Or was it all just a coincidence? A random act of terror? I didn't stay home alone again for a long time. Even now, at 38, I wouldn't say I'm scared to be alone, but I'm never quite comfortable either. Because every now and then, I still dream about that night. The storm, the shadow, the voice on the phone.